I'm Davy. I'm awesome. And welcome to Davy's Awesome Movies, where I review the styles of movies I love, the alternative, B-rated, cult-style flicks. Well, it's October, it's Halloween season. And honestly, one of the things I think of when I think of Halloween is Universal monsters. We see them everywhere, every year. Masks, toys, copies of these old movies on display that do still sell, tons and tons of merchandising coming from these Universal monsters, and they have cult followings. Not only because they are some good movies, but there's a nostalgia factor there. So this month we're going to be doing Universal monsters, and probably every October for the next few years. There's a lot of them. I'm going to kick it off with the one that kicked it off. This one started the whole Universal monster thing in the year 1931. And it was directed by Todd Browning and uncredited Carl Friend, and written by Garrett Fort, based on the book by Bram Stoker, and mostly the play by Hamilton Dean and John L. Boulderston. Produced by Todd Browning and Carl Laemmle Jr., and of course distributed by Universal Pictures. Ladies and gentlemen, Dracula. The movie opens with a group of travelers in a carriage. Among these travelers, some of them think that it's going way too fast, others think it's not going fast enough, because they need to reach an inn by sundown. Because the night is...
the night of evil, Nosferatu.
Oh, it's the night they're going to watch this silent film? This is credited as the first vampire movie. If nothing else, it's the oldest one we know of. Even though it wasn't a Dracula movie, Bram Stoker's family sued the crap out of them because of how similar it was to his novel. The one we're watching, they were smart enough to secure the rights. When they arrive at the inn, one of the passengers says he's not stopping here.
Don't take my luggage down. I'm going on to Borgo Pass tonight.
That's Renfield, played by Dwight Fry. They ask him if he can wait until morning, but he says he can't. He's scheduled to meet another carriage at midnight.
Whose carriage?
Count Dracula's.
Scheduled?
They try to dissuade Renfield, telling him that Count Dracula and his wives are vampires. But what I'm more concerned with is the part that he said wives. Dracula is a polygamist. Why would anybody want to do that? Don't get me wrong, I love my wife to death, but I don't want four of her. Renfield doesn't believe them, and he's going on to meet that carriage at midnight. But a woman wants to give him something first.
Wear this, for your mother's sake. It will protect you.
Why wouldn't a Star of David keep him safe? Is Dracula anti-Semitic? When Renfield and the carriage he's in finally get to the point where they meet the carriage that is going to take him the rest of the way to Dracula's castle... Well, someone's getting a bad Yelp review. At some point, Renfield wants to talk to the driver about the fact that he's just going way too fast. But he gets freaked out when at the front of the carriage he sees a bat. Listen, Renfield, I know it's a little scary, but just don't eat the bat and everything should be okay. Wish a couple of years ago somebody would have followed that advice. When they arrive at Dracula's castle, he gets out to go complain to the driver. He got you there safely, Renfield. That's the important thing. Gonna go be a Karen? You need to talk to his manager?
Hey, driver. What do you mean by going at this?
Maybe he took off because he had to take a major piss. So Renfield goes inside.
I am Dracula.
And doesn't put it together that Dracula looks exactly like the guy who was driving his carriage. That's legendary actor Bela Lugosi, by the way.
I thought I was in the wrong place.
Oh, you really are. Then they hear howling.
Children of the night, what music they make.
Now shut up! Dracula shows Renfield the inside of the castle and also gives him some food and makes sure that he kept the meeting with Dracula a secret.
I followed your instructions implicitly.
Yeah, if somebody asked me to go thousands of miles away from anybody I know into another country and meet with them in the middle of the night at a creepy castle, but also told me like, hey, don't tell anybody, keep it to yourself, I think I would decline. Duh! Dracula is leasing Carfax Abbey in London. This is way before automobiles came out, so I imagine back then Carfax must have, like, I don't know, handled accidents for buggies. He tells Renfield that he's chartered a ship to take them to London.
We will be leaving tomorrow evening.
Like hell I would! Not for another one of these classic Dracula lines that have lived on from movie to movie to movie to movie. Dracula offers Renfield some wine.
Aren't you drinking?
I never drink. Why?
God, this guy is creepy. Dracula bids Renfield a good night, and Renfield decides to go look around. If a fake bat is all it takes to make you faint, you're in for a long night, buddy. Please, no hickeys. After Dracula is finished with his sexual assault on Renfield, we cut to them on the ship.
Master, the sun is gone.
Renfield is now his slave. By the time they get to London,
Captain dead, tied to the wheel.
Dracula has killed the entire crew of the ship. Which makes me wonder, he did that out in the middle of the sea. Renfield doesn't know how to pilot a ship. How the hell did they get to London? The people who found the ship find Renfield. Who do you think did it better? Dwight Fry? Art Johnson? Or Peter McNichol? Either way, they're all part of my laughing tracks. Of course, they think that Renfield's cheese has slid off his cracker, so they put him into the sanitarium. That night, Dracula meets with Dr. Seward, who runs Seward's sanitarium. Which, good for him, because the name matched up perfectly. He also meets Seward's daughter, Mina, her friend, Lucy, and her fiancé, Jonathan Harker. Later that night, Mina and Lucy are talking about the Count. Lucy's taken quite a liking to him.
I think he's fascinating.
That's definitely one way to put it. Turns out Dracula has taken a liking to Lucy as well. Pervert! Lucy goes to bed and Dracula turns himself into a bat. A bat that apparently can't move forward or backward or anything, can only just sit there and fly in place. But hey, whatever. It's time for Dracula to smell Lucy and figure out what that intoxicating scent is. It's Irish Spring. Then we see Lucy in an autopsy room at a teaching hospital, and they are examining her body. They have found that not only has she lost almost all of her blood, but she has 2 bite marks on the end of her neck, which draws them to only one possible conclusion. Bed bugs! Over at the sanitarium,
Don't throw my spider away from me. Oh, Martin. No.
Renfield is not allowed to eat big lives like humans. To keep himself immortal, he eats small lives. He was eating flies, but now he's on to spiders. I mean, who wants to eat flies?
You do, ya loony.
I don't think it's very professional of the staff at a sanitarium to be calling the patients loonies. Dr. Seward needs some help. He calls in Professor Abraham von Helsing, played by Edward Van Sloan, who, if you watch this channel, you're going to see again, because he was actually in a few of these Universal Monster movies. In fact, the first 3, he was in them. Van Helsing knows the legend of vampires and is sure that it must be a vampire doing these killings. Van Helsing puts it together that Renfield came along at the same time and suspects that he is a slave to this vampire, so he brings him in for questioning. At one point, to test the theory that he himself is a pseudo-vampire,
You know too much to live, Van Helsing.
Wolfsbane, which is a legend of things that vampires hate, kind of like garlic, except there is no garlic in this movie, they just use the wolfsbane. Looking it up, I don't know when the myth of garlic came along for vampires, but wolfsbane did precede it.
If you don't send me away, you must answer for what will happen to Miss Mina.
Now Dracula sets his sights on Mina. Okay, just a little constructive criticism. That look doesn't say I'm creepy and I'm gonna bite you so much as it says, I'm passing a kidney stone. The next morning, Mina thinks it must have just been a dream. But she has bite marks on her neck. Which honestly, I gotta say, if you have a dream that you're bitten by a vampire, and then you wake up and have bite marks on your neck, and you're not putting 2 and 2 together, forget about turning her back into a human, just stake her. As they're discussing this, Dracula shows up, and suggests that Mina's bad dreams might just be from stories he had been telling her about his homeland of Transylvania. Of course, Van Helsing is a little suspicious, especially when he sees that Dracula has no reflection whatsoever in the mirror inside of Jonathan Harker's cigarette box. After this, Van Helsing suggests that it's time for Mina to go to bed to get her out of the room. Once she excuses herself, Van Helsing proceeds to ask Dracula's opinion on something. He never smokes cigarettes. I too do not smoke cigarettes. I smoke turkeys and hams. Dracula apologizes for his behavior. Good thing, dude, that was a little bit rude.
Van Helsing will explain.
He kinda already has for like 5 minutes. As Van Helsing is explaining even more about vampires, Mina is being called by Dracula, so she goes to him out into the yard. Which says that maybe if you guys would just shut up and stop repeating yourselves about vampires over and over again, maybe you could avoid some of this. Duh! While they're talking...
Large enough for him to rest in.
Renfield is eavesdropping. So between Dracula breaking somebody's mirror and Renfield over there listening in on people's conversations, vampires are extremely rude.
Yes, I heard something.
They ask him questions and all he does is give cryptic answers until he sees a bat.
No, Master. I wasn't going to say anything.
And to break all this up, the maid comes in.
Miss Mina! Out there dead!
Hey,
Out there!
So they go to Mina.
Thank heaven she's alive.
She's not the only one that's still alive.
She's alive?
No. Lucius Nosferatu.
She's Italian?
Once again, Renfield comes in to tell them some more cryptic things without actually telling them anything. Which makes no point. Except that he can keep getting out of his cell. How?
Now he's twisted and broken them iron bars as if they was cheese.
Would an enema help? This tells Van Helsing that Dracula must be near. So everyone scatters to go look for him. Once Van Helsing is alone, though, he sees Dracula.
Come here.
Mind control! I tried to do that to my wife once. She kicked me in the nards. Even though Van Helsing struggles, though, his will is strong. Strong enough to resist Dracula's mind control. To get him to really back off, Van Helsing has a surprise.
Indeed.
Doesn't like surprises. Jonathan Harker goes to check on Mina, who seemingly is all better, but now she's complaining about the wolfsbane.
Why are you looking at me like that?
Because he's trying to fart, but he doesn't want to make noise. While Jonathan and Mina are talking...
There's that bat again.
Pull the strings. Pull the strings. Jonathan, despite the fact that he's ridiculously clueless, is finally noticing that Mina is acting strange.
Mina, you're... No, Mina, no!
We've only been engaged for 5 years! Luckily, Van Helsing was near, so he pulled out that cross and saved Jonathan. I wouldn't. Mina is starting to come back into her right frame of mind for a moment, and she's so distraught that she wants them to kill her over what Dracula has done to her.
Dracula? Oh, what's he done to you today? Tell me.
Have you not been listening, dude? Dracula uses his mind control on Mina's nurse to have her get rid of the wolfsbane so that he can get in and have access to Mina. Which means clearly she's not as strong-willed as Van Helsing is. Then Dracula gets Mina and takes her back to Carfax Abbey.
Master, I'm here.
Renfield's there too. Problem is, though, Jonathan Harker and Van Helsing followed Renfield there.
I didn't leave him here, Master.
You kinda did. Well, that's done. But the thing is, Dracula had to put a stop to this because the daylight came out, and he had to go get into his box with the earth from his homeland in it, which he has to do during the day. And because of this, he's helpless, he's defenseless, and that's when Jonathan Harker and Van Helsing find him. So they act with moderate quickness.
Mina!
Back then, they didn't have the effects to show this. So now Mina is saved.
Dracula is dead forever.
Yeah, right. You have any idea how many more Dracula movies are coming after this? So there you have it. That's the classic. The first Dracula. The one that started it all. This movie had a budget of $341,191 with a box office of over $700,000 in its opening weekend. That means it was a huge success. Because back then in the 1930s, $300,000 was quite a bit of money to spend on a movie. But to make that much in its opening weekend was huge. This movie, though, is iconic. Even though Bela Lugosi had great reviews from playing Dracula on stage, they didn't want him originally in the role of Dracula. He lobbied very hard to play this part. So much so that he agreed to a sum of only $500 a week to be Dracula. The original movie, though, at the end had an epilogue by Edward von Sloan telling the audience about what they had just seen, hoping they wouldn't be too scared. Basically what they ended up doing at the beginning of the next Universal Monster movie that would come out, Frankenstein. However, in the 1939 re-release of this movie, they cut that part off the end and the footage has been lost. Funny thing, though, is even though Bela Lugosi made this part iconic, being the first Dracula, being the person that people would mimic for years to come, playing Dracula, still selling merchandise of his image as Dracula, the only other time that he would actually portray Dracula again was in the movie Abbott and Costello Meet Frankenstein. He'd go on to play vampires again, but never Dracula. Again, this movie shows what a master of his craft he was. Because if you actually pay attention through this movie, not one time in the entire movie do you see Dracula blink. That was all Bela Lugosi. Problem was, though, is this did kind of typecast Bela Lugosi as either playing vampires or just really creepy characters. But he wasn't the only one that got typecasted. Dwight Frye, the guy who played Renfield, after this he was typecasted as playing eccentric, insane maniacs. Basically always playing jittery lunatics. Even in the next one, Frankenstein. The thing is, nowadays people watch this and they're like, it's cheesy, it doesn't actually show any death scenes, it doesn't have any blood. They didn't have the technology for that. This was still in the age of when movies were transitioning from silent films into what they were calling at the time the talkies. But this is the movie that is credited for kicking off the horror genre. Before that, sure, horror movies had been made, but they weren't like a thing. Now they were officially a thing. Started with monsters, but has progressed. Basically, all the horror movies you love today all owe their origins to Dracula. Not only is it great for nostalgia, but I just love the contribution it made. So many great vampire movies have come from this, including my favorite one of all time being Bram Stoker's Dracula. You know, the one with Gary Oldman, Winona Ryder, Anthony Hopkins, Keanu Reeves.
It's Keanu!
Oh, come on. I know you love him, but it wasn't like he was the greatest actor in the world.
How dare you, old sport! I am a graduate of the Keanu Reeves School of Acting. His acting in Bram Stoker's Dracula was a precedent for all of us to stand by. Watch as the genius unfolds. I say, is the castle far?
So based on that, like I said, if you're a fan of vampire movies, you're a fan of horror movies, and you're a fan of nostalgia as well, then I recommend you check out the 1931 version of Dracula. So there you have it. That's my movie review this week. I hope you guys enjoyed it. And if you did, make sure to hit like, hit subscribe, hit that little bell so you get notifications for when I post new videos, and leave a comment. Tell me what you thought of the 1931 Dracula. Tell me which vampire movie is your favorite of all time. Love you guys.